In a galaxy where humans are considered the weakest species, where our lack of natural armor, telepathic abilities, or extended lifespans makes us nothing more than scavengers in the eyes of advanced civilizations, one woman with a simple medical kit would prove that humanity's greatest strength isn't in our bodies, it's in our hearts. When Dr. Sarah Chun found a dying dragon on a forgotten moon, she had no idea that her act of compassion would ignite a revolution across the stars. The creature she saved wasn't just any dragon. It was the last of the Drachmer, an ancient species thought extinct for millennia, being so revered that entire civilizations once worshipped them as gods. But Sarah didn't know this when she knelt beside the massive, scaled form bleeding out in the crater. She saw only a living being in pain and did what humans do best. She helped without asking for anything in return. What followed would shake the very foundations of galactic society, challenge the supremacy of the dominant species, and earn humanity a title they never sought, but would prove they deserved: the sacred healers of the galaxy. This is the story of how one human's kindness became the catalyst for humanity's greatest triumph among the stars. Dr. Sarah Chun had seen better days and better moons. The rocky surface of Kepler 442c stretched endlessly before her, a desolate landscape of red dust and jagged stones that looked like the aftermath of some cosmic tantrum. Her small exploration pod sat behind her, its hull scarred from the rough landing she'd been forced to make when the navigation system decided to have what her grandmother would have called a moment. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her gloved hand, leaving a streak of dust across her pale skin. At 28, she was young for a xenobiologist, but old enough to know that finding herself stranded on an uncharted moon in the Outer Rim was about as far from her planned research expedition as she could get. The emergency beacon was working, supposedly, but in this part of space, it might be weeks before anyone picked up the signal. Well, at least the atmosphere's breathable, she muttered to herself, a habit she developed during her years of solo research missions. Talking to herself was better than the silence that pressed in from all sides on these dead worlds. Could be worse. Could be raining acid, as if the universe heard her and decided to take it as a challenge. A low rumble echoed across the barren landscape. Sarah looked up at the rust-colored sky, expecting to see storm clouds gathering, but instead saw something that made her heart skip a beat. A massive object was falling from the upper atmosphere, trailing fire and smoke as it plummeted toward the surface. Not a meteor. Meteors didn't have that kind of controlled descent pattern. This was a ship, and it was in serious trouble. Sarah grabbed her emergency medical kit from the pod and started running toward the impact site. Her boots crunched against the loose gravel, each step sending up small puffs of red dust. The object hit the surface about a kilometer away with a sound like thunder, sending a shock wave through the ground that nearly knocked her off her feet. A pillar of smoke and debris rose into the air, and Sarah could smell something burning even from this distance. Her training kicked in. Forget her own problems. If there were survivors in that crash, they needed help immediately. She'd spent 6 years studying alien biology and another 4 in emergency xenomedical procedures. It was what humans did best in the galaxy, everyone said. They might not be the strongest or the fastest, but they could fix almost anything that was broken. The crash site was worse than she'd expected. What had once been some kind of spacecraft was now a twisted mass of metal and strange crystalline materials she didn't recognize. But it wasn't the wreckage that made her stop in her tracks and stare in disbelief. It was what lay beside it. The creature was massive, easily 30 meters from nose to tail, with scales that shimmered between deep purple and midnight black, even though they were dulled by dust and blood. Its wings were folded against its sides, each one large enough to shelter her entire research pod. For legs ended in claws that looked like they could tear through starship hulls, and its head was long and elegant, with intelligence burning in eyes that were still open, still aware, still alive. Sarah had never seen anything like it. In all her years studying alien species, all the creatures she'd encountered in the galaxy's diverse ecosystems, nothing had prepared her for this. The being looked like something out of ancient Earth mythology, like the dragons from the stories her grandmother used to tell her. But this wasn't mythology. This was real. It was here, and it was dying. Blood, dark blue, and thick as syrup, leaked from dozens of wounds across the creature's body. Its breathing was labored, each rise and fall of its chest weaker than the last. One wing hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken, and Sarah could see exposed bone through a particularly nasty gash along its flank. Whatever this being was, wherever it had come from, it wouldn't survive much longer without immediate medical attention. Sarah's hands moved automatically to her medical kit, muscle memory taking over while her mind tried to process what she was seeing. The creature's eyes, large and intelligent and ancient-looking, tracked her movement. There was no fear there, she realized. No aggression, just pain and something that might have been resignation. Easy, she said softly, approaching slowly with her hands visible. She had no idea if the creature could understand her words, but tone was often universal. I'm not going to hurt you. I want to help. The dragon, and what else could she call it, made a sound deep in its throat, not quite a growl, not quite a sigh. Its massive head turned slightly to watch her approach, and Sarah felt the weight of its gaze. Those eyes held intelligence that seemed older than star systems, and she had the unsettling feeling that it was evaluating her as much as she was evaluating it. Sarah knelt beside the creature's head, close enough to touch if she wanted to. Its breathing was definitely getting weaker. Whatever species it was clearly dying, and her basic medical training told her she had minutes, not hours, to act. The problem was she had no idea how to treat a creature like this. Her kit was designed for the common species found in this part of the galaxy. Humanoids, mostly, with standard carbon-based biology. This thing was completely unknown. But the fundamentals had to be the same, right? Stop the bleeding, stabilize the patient, treat for shock. Sarah had treated injured Thoraxians with their silicon-based blood and Zephyrian traders with their dual heart systems. Biology was biology, even when it came in scales and wings. She opened her kit and pulled out the universal scanner, a device that could analyze biological functions across most known species. When she ran it over the dragon's body, the readings made her whistle low under her breath. The creature's physiology was incredibly complex, not just one heart, but three arranged in a triangle pattern in its chest. Its blood chemistry was unlike anything in her database, but the scanner was picking up massive internal bleeding and what looked like severe organ damage. Okay, big guy, she said, pulling out the emergency surgical supplies. I have no idea if this is going to work, but we're going to try. The dragon's eyes followed her movements, and when she approached with the biofoam injector, a device designed to stop internal bleeding, it actually lifted its head slightly to give her better access to the worst wound. As if it understood what she was trying to do. As if it was helping. Sarah had never worked on a patient this large, and certainly never won this alien, but her hands were steady as she worked. She used the entire supply of biofoam to seal the internal bleeding, then moved on to the external wounds. The creature's scales were tougher than starship armor, but wherever they'd been damaged, the flesh beneath was surprisingly similar to species she knew how to treat. Working by touch and instinct, Sarah cleaned wounds, applied synthetic skin patches where she could, and used her entire supply of universal antibiotics to prevent infection. The dragon lay perfectly still during the entire procedure, never flinching even when she had to dig debris out of the deeper cuts. Its eyes never left her face, and she found herself talking to it as she worked, explaining what she was doing, apologizing when she knew something was going to hurt. "This is going to sting," she said as she applied antiseptic to a particularly nasty gash. I know it hurts, but we need to clean this out." The creature made that sound again, the not-quite growl that sounded almost conversational. Sarah found herself smiling despite the dire situation. "You're being very patient," she told it, wrapping synthetic bandages around its injured wing. "Much better than the Corvin trader I treated last month. He kept trying to bite me." By the time she'd done everything she could with her limited supplies, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that made the landscape look even more alien. The dragon's breathing had stabilized somewhat, though it was still weak. Sarah sat back on her heels, exhausted, and looked at her patient. She'd used every supply in her kit, and she honestly wasn't sure it would be enough. "I wish I could do more," she said quietly. "I wish I knew what you needed." The dragon turned its great head toward her, and for a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw something like gratitude in those ancient eyes. Then, to her complete shock, the creature began to glow. It started as just a faint shimmer along the edges of its scales, like heat distortion, but quickly grew brighter. The light was warm and golden, not harsh, and it seemed to pulse in rhythm with the dragon's breathing. Sarah scrambled backward, suddenly afraid she'd done something wrong, that the creature was having some kind of allergic reaction to her treatment. But the dragon wasn't in distress. If anything, it looked more peaceful than it had since she'd found it. The glow intensified, and Sarah realized with wonder that the wounds she'd treated were healing. Not just the surface cuts, but the deep tissue damage, the broken bones, everything. The creature was regenerating at an impossible rate, using some kind of internal energy source she'd never encountered before. Within minutes, the dragon was whole again. It rose to its feet with fluid grace, towering over her like a living mountain. Its scales gleamed in the fading light, and its wings spread wide, casting shadows across the crash site. Sarah found herself flat on her back, having fallen over in her haste to get out of the way, staring up at the most magnificent creature she'd ever seen. The dragon looked down at her, and she was sure now that what she saw in its eyes was gratitude. It lowered its massive head until it was level with hers, close enough that she could feel its warm breath against her face. When it spoke, the words formed directly in her mind, not heard but understood, in a voice like distant thunder. "Little healer," it said, and the words carried weight beyond their meaning, carrying respect and wonder and something that might have been reverence. "You have done something extraordinary." Sarah's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to find her voice. "You can talk. You're telepathic. I am Kedron, last of the Drachmer." The dragon's mental voice was warm, ancient, and infinitely sad. "For 3,000 years, I have wandered the galaxy alone, watching the younger races grow and change. In all that time, no being has shown me such kindness without knowing what I am. You saw only a creature in pain, and you helped." Sarah sat up slowly, still overwhelmed by the situation. "That's what we do. Humans, I mean. We help when we can." "Yes," Kedron said, and there was something in his mental tone that made Sarah think he was smiling, if dragons could smile. I have watched your species for some time, little healer. The other races mock you for your weakness, but they do not understand what I have seen. You have something they lack. What's that? Compassion without condition. The Zephyrians help only their own kind. The Thraxians calculate the profit in every action. The Valdari pride themselves on logic above all else. But humans, the dragon's eyes seem to look through her, seeing something beyond the present moment. Humans see suffering and seek to end it. You ask for nothing in return. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. It's not that special. It's just basic decency. To you, perhaps. To the galaxy, it is the rarest gift of all. Kedron rose to his full height, wings spreading even wider. Sarachin of Earth, you have given me a great gift, and the Drachmer do not forget debts. What would you ask of me in return? Sarah looked around at the crash site, then back at her damaged pod in the distance. Well, if you're offering, I could use a ride home. My navigation system is fried, and my emergency beacon probably won't reach anyone for weeks. The dragon's laughter was like music in her mind, warm and genuine. Is that all? Little healer, you have saved the last of an ancient race. Surely there is more you would ask for. I didn't save you to get something in return, Sarah said firmly. I saved you because you needed saving. That's what humans do. Yes, Kedron said softly. It is indeed what humans do. Very well, Sarah-chun. I will take you home. But first, there is something you should know about what you have done this day. What do you mean? The dragon's mental voice grew serious, weighted with significance. The Drachmer are not just another species, child. We are the firstborn, the eldest children of this galaxy. Before your sun was formed, before most of the current races drew breath, we flew between the stars. We were there when the first civilizations rose, when the great empires fell, when the current powers took their thrones. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air. You're saying you're ancient. We are legend, myth, the subjects of religious texts across 100 worlds. The Zephyrians worship us as gods. The Thraxians have built their entire culture around the promise of our return. The Valdari's greatest philosophers have written volumes about our wisdom. Kedron's eyes met hers directly, and you, Sarah-chun, have saved the last of us with nothing but a standard medical kit and the courage to care about a stranger's pain. The full implications of what he was saying began to sink in. Oh no, that's going to complicate things, isn't it? Indeed it is, little healer. Indeed it is. Flying on the back of a dragon was nothing like Sarah had imagined as a child reading fantasy stories. For one thing, there was no saddle, no convenient handholds, just the smooth expanse of Kedron's back between his powerful wings. For another, the view from several thousand meters up made her acutely aware of just how far she could fall. But the dragon's flight was surprisingly smooth, and his scales provided more grip than she'd expected. Try to relax, Kedron's voice whispered in her mind as they soared through the star-filled void between worlds. His body generated its own atmosphere field, allowing her to breathe normally in space. We have a journey of several days ahead of us. Your tension will only make it more difficult. Sarah forced herself to loosen her death grip on the ridge of scales in front of her. This is pretty far outside my normal experience, even for one who travels between stars. That's different. Spaceships have walls and artificial gravity and life support systems. She gestured at the cosmic vista around them, the swirling nebulae and distant galaxies visible in the clear space between systems. This is flying through space on the back of a living creature. My brain is having trouble processing that this is actually possible. Kedron's mental chuckle rumbled through her consciousness. Your species has much to learn about what is possible, Sarah Chun. The galaxy is far stranger and more wonderful than most races understand. They had been traveling for 6 hours since leaving the moon, and Sarah was beginning to appreciate the scope of Kedron's abilities. He moved through space like he was born to it, navigating by some internal sense that seemed to know exactly where they were going. No instruments, no star charts, just an ancient understanding of the cosmos that came from millennia of experience. Can I ask you something? Sarah said as they passed through the outer edge of a solar system she didn't recognize. Of course. Why were you on that moon? I mean, from what you're telling me, you're basically a living legend. What were you doing crashed on an uninhabited rock in the middle of nowhere? Kedron was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if she'd offended him. When he finally answered, his mental voice was heavy with sadness. I was looking for others of my kind. I have spent centuries following every rumor, every legend, every supposed sighting of the Drakmar. That moon showed traces of our passage from long ago, scorch marks in the stone that could only come from dragon fire, crystalline formations that form where we have nested. He paused, his wings beating steadily as they approached a jump point. I was wrong. The traces were older than I had hoped, from my own people's presence there thousands of years past. There was no one. Sarah felt her heart clench with sympathy. How long has it been since you've seen another of your people? 3 centuries since the last one died. Her name was Silarai, and she was my sister. We searched together for others, hoping against hope that somewhere in the galaxy, some small population of our people had survived. We found nothing. The pain in his mental voice was almost too much to bear. When she grew ill with the fading, a disease that affects only the very old among our kind, I could do nothing but watch her die. Since then, I have searched alone. I'm sorry, Sarah said quietly. That must be incredibly lonely. Loneliness is a small price to pay for the chance, however slim, that others might still exist. But yes, it has been difficult. Your people have a saying, I believe, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Sarah nodded, even though she knew he couldn't see her from this angle. We do, but we also say that hope is the thing with feathers. Explain. It's from a poet named Emily Dickinson. She said hope is like a bird that perches in the soul and sings without words and never stops at all. No matter how bad things get, hope keeps singing. Kedron was quiet again, but this time Sarah sensed contemplation rather than sadness. Your poets understand much about the nature of existence. Perhaps that is another reason why humans are unique in the galaxy. They entered the jump point, and reality twisted around them in ways that made Sarah's stomach lurch. She'd been through hyperspace hundreds of times, but never in open space, never feeling the dimensional shift directly against her skin. It was like being turned inside out and put back together in the space of a heartbeat. When normal space reasserted itself around them, they were in a system Sarah recognized. 3 planets orbited a yellow sun very similar to Earth's, and the inner planet was covered in the geometric patterns that marked a heavily populated world. Nexus Prime, the unofficial capital of this sector of the galaxy, and home to the Galactic Council's regional headquarters. Why are we here? Sarah asked, suddenly nervous. Nexus Prime was where all the major galactic powers maintained embassies, where trade agreements were negotiated and territorial disputes were settled. It was also where humans were barely tolerated as minor players in galactic politics. Because word of what you did will spread quickly once we reach your homeworld, Kedron replied. Better that certain parties learn of recent events from me directly than through rumors and second-hand reports. They descended through the planet's atmosphere, past the orbital traffic control stations and commercial shipping lanes. Sarah could see the massive city sprawling below them, a mixture of architectural styles from dozens of different species, all somehow managing to coexist in geometric harmony. Kedron aimed for the diplomatic quarter, where the buildings were larger and more impressive, each one designed to showcase the power and grandeur of the species it represented. The dragon landed in the central plaza with surprising gentleness, his claws clicking against the polished stone surface. Almost immediately, they were surrounded. Sarah had expected security forces, maybe some curious onlookers, but what she saw made her blood run cold. Representatives from every major galactic power were there, as if they had been waiting. Tall, ethereal Zephyrians with their flowing robes and silver skin. Crystalline Thoraxians whose bodies reflected the plaza's lights in prismatic rainbows. Valdari in their formal diplomatic armor, faces hidden behind ceremonial masks. And other species Sarah recognized from textbooks and news broadcasts but had never seen in person. They weren't just standing there. They were kneeling. "Kedron," she whispered, "why are they all kneeling?" "Because, little healer, they recognize what I am. And by extension, they recognize what you have become." A Zephyrian stepped forward, or rather, glided forward, their species' form of locomotion being more like controlled floating than walking. Sarah recognized the individual from news broadcasts. Ambassador Veltar, the Zephyrian representative to the Galactic Council, and one of the most powerful individuals in this sector of space. "Great Kedron," Veltar said, their voice carrying the musical quality typical of their species. "We were told you had returned to us, but we scarcely dare believe. It has been so long since any of the firstborn walked among the younger races." "Rise, Veltar of the Silver Cities," Kedron replied aloud, his actual voice even more impressive than his mental communication. It resonated like distant thunder, carrying harmonics that seemed to vibrate in Sarah's bones. "I have not returned, as you understand the term. I have simply survived." The Zephyrian rose gracefully, and Sarah noticed that all the other representatives remained kneeling. Veltar's large, opalescent eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to hide behind Kedron's massive form. "And this is the one?" Veltar asked. "The human who saved you?" "Dr. Sarah Chun," Kedron said formally, "xenobiologist of Earth, member of no formal diplomatic mission, citizen of a world barely recognized by the greater galactic community. She found me dying and chose to help, asking nothing in return." A ripple went through the assembled representatives. Sarah heard whispers in a dozen different languages, words she couldn't understand but whose tone conveyed surprise, disbelief, and something that sounded like awe. "Honored Kedron," came a crystalline voice from the Thoraxian delegation. Sarah looked over to see a being whose body seemed to be carved from living diamond, light refracting through their form in mesmerizing patterns. "Surely you do not mean to tell us that a human saved one of the firstborn with basic medicine?" "I mean to tell you exactly that, Crystallord Thexvar, with a standard medical kit, basic surgical supplies, and the compassion that seems to be uniquely human." Kedron's voice carried a note of challenge. "Is this so difficult to believe?" The Thoraxian's form flickered as light patterns raced through their crystalline structure, the equivalent of stammering. "It is unprecedented. The Drachma are beyond such simple treatments. Your biology, your life force, the very essence of what makes you firstborn should be beyond the understanding of a lesser species." Kedron finished. should be impossible to treat with the crude medicine of humans. The dragon's voice carried amusement now, but underneath it was something much more dangerous. Perhaps, Crystal Lord, your understanding of what makes one species lesser than another is incomplete. A Valdari representative stepped forward, their movement crisp and military despite their ceremonial robes. Sarah recognized the rank insignia. This was a high commander, someone with the authority to speak for their entire species. Great Kedron, the Valdari said, their voice artificially modulated through their masked speakers. What the Crystal Lord means to express is that the implications of this event are significant. If humans possess the ability to heal even the firstborn, it suggests capabilities we have not previously recognized in their species. It suggests, said a new voice, smooth and cultured, that perhaps we have been too hasty in our assessment of human potential. Sarah turned to see who had spoken and felt her heart sink. The newcomer was Corvani, part of a species that looked disturbingly similar to humans, but was bigger, stronger, faster, and generally superior in every measurable way. The Corvani had made no secret of their disdain for humanity, viewing Earth's people as evolutionary dead and cluttering up the galaxy. This particular Corvani was clearly high-ranking, wearing the deep purple robes that marked him as a member of their High Senate. His name came to Sarah suddenly. Senator Calvesh, one of the most vocal opponents of human expansion into galactic society. Senator, Kedron acknowledged with what Sarah was learning to recognize as dangerous politeness. How unexpected to find you here. When word spread that one of the firstborn had returned, accompanied by a human claiming to have saved them, I felt it necessary to witness this development personally. Calvesh's smile was all teeth, predatory and cold. Surely you understand our concern, Great Kedron. The balance of galactic power rests on acknowledged truths about the capabilities of various species. If these truths are suddenly called into question, you fear that humanity might rise above its current station, Kedron said bluntly. You fear that the universe might discover that the weak humans possess something that the strong species lack. I fear chaos, Calvesh replied smoothly. The galaxy has enjoyed centuries of stability based on the understanding that each species contributes according to their abilities. The Zephyrians provide wisdom and spiritual guidance. The Thraxians offer technology and resources. The Valdari ensure order and security. The Corvani lead through our natural advantages. Humans serve as laborers and support staff. It is the natural order. Sarah felt anger building in her chest. She'd heard variations of this speech before, usually from species that consider humanity too primitive to participate meaningfully in galactic civilization. But hearing it now, standing next to a creature of myth and legend who had just declared that her simple act of kindness was extraordinary, the words stung worse than usual. Natural order, she said, speaking for the first time since they'd landed. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. According to who? The plaza fell silent. Every eye, or optical sensor, in the case of some species, focused on her. Sarah suddenly realized that she had just interrupted a conversation between beings who could probably end her homeworld civilization with a word to the right people. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to interrupt. No, Kedron said, and his voice carried approval. You have every right to speak, Sarah Chen. In fact, I would very much like to hear what you have to say. Sarah looked around at the assembled representatives, all of them waiting for her response. Her mouth was dry, but she forced herself to continue. I just think it's interesting that you talk about natural order, about each species contributing according to their abilities. But when I found Kedron dying on that moon, I didn't think about galactic politics or species hierarchies. I saw a living being in pain, and I helped. That's what humans do. We don't help people because we expect to gain something from it. We help because it's right. A pretty sentiment, Calvesh said dismissively, but hardly unique. All civilized species. No, Sarah interrupted again, and this time she didn't apologize. All civilized species help their own kind. All civilized species calculate cost and benefit. All civilized species think about political implications and social status and what's in it for them. Humans help strangers. We help our enemies. We help people who can never pay us back. We help people who wouldn't help us in return. And apparently, we're the only ones who do that. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Then Veltar spoke, their musical voice thoughtful. Is this true, Great Kedron? Is this uniquely human behavior? Kedron's massive head turned to look at each of the assembled representatives in turn. In 3,000 years of observing the younger races, I have never seen another species act with the unconditional compassion that Sarah Chun showed me. Every other race I have encountered provides aid with strings attached, with expectations of reciprocity, with calculations of advantage. Only humans help simply because help is needed. But surely the Theraxian, Thexvar, interjected, this is a sign of poor judgment rather than virtue. Acting without considering consequences, helping without ensuring mutual benefit. These are not the behaviors of an advanced civilization. Are they not? Kedron asked. Tell me, Crystal Lord, when your people first encountered the Zephyrians, what was your initial response? The Theraxians' light patterns flickered. We evaluated their potential as trading partners. And you, Commander Veltar, when the Valdari first made contact with your worlds, we assessed their military capabilities and considered whether alliance would be advantageous, the Valdari representative admitted. Senator Calvesh, your people's first response to discovering the Theraxians. The Corvani smile had disappeared. We determined whether they posed a threat to our expansion plans. And all of you, Kedron continued, when you first learned of humanity's existence, the silence was answer enough. You evaluated them as potential competitors, as possible resources to exploit, as problems to be managed. Not one of you looked at humanity and thought simply, here are people who might need our help. Because that would be impractical, Calvesh said stiffly. Inefficient. Resources are limited, and any species that survives long enough to achieve interstellar travel must understand the principles of resource allocation and strategic advantage. Perhaps, Kedron said, or perhaps you have all forgotten something that humans never forgot. Perhaps in your drive for efficiency and advantage, you lost the ability to recognize that some things transcend practical considerations, such as Veltor asked, such as the fact that I am alive today because a young human woman saw a creature in pain and acted without thought of reward, without consideration of danger, without calculation of advantage. She risked her life and exhausted her resources to save a being she had never seen before from a species she didn't recognize, with no expectation of gratitude or compensation. Kedron's voice grew stronger, carrying harmonics that made the very air vibrate. She did this not because she is human, but because she is the best of what humanity aspires to be. And that, honored representatives, is why your natural order is about to change. The journey to Earth took 3 standard days, during which Sarah got an education in galactic politics that no university could have provided. Kedron, it turned out, was not just the last of his species. He was also their greatest historian, philosopher, and keeper of ancient knowledge. As they flew through the void between stars, he shared with her the real history of the galaxy, the version that never made it into official records. The Drachma were not rulers in the way the current powers understand rule. Kedron explained as they passed through a particularly beautiful nebula, its gases glowing in shades of blue and gold around them. We were guides, teachers, protectors. When the first civilizations reached for the stars, we were there to help them avoid the mistakes that could destroy them. Sarah adjusted her position on his back, her makeshift harness of emergency cables keeping her secure against the scales. What kind of mistakes? The kind your species is in danger of making now. The division of peoples into categories of worth. The assumption that strength equals virtue. The belief that survival requires the subjugation of others. Kedron's mental voice carried deep sadness. We watched the Corvani develop this philosophy over centuries, and we failed to redirect them. The same with the Thraxians' obsession with resource extraction, the Valdari's militaristic hierarchy, even the Zephyrians' withdrawal into spiritual superiority. Why didn't you stop them? Because we had learned, sometimes too late, that forced change creates only rebellion and resentment. We could only guide, suggest, hope that wisdom would eventually triumph over ambition. His laugh was bitter. We were naive, perhaps. We believed that, given time, all species would develop the compassion necessary for true civilization. And now I have seen that compassion arise naturally in humanity, without centuries of guidance, without philosophical evolution, without any outside influence at all. You simply are what we hoped all the younger races would become. Sarah was quiet for a while, watching the stars wheel around them as Kedron navigated by some internal compass she couldn't begin to understand. No pressure there, she finally said. Indeed, little healer, I fear that what you did on that moon will place great pressure on your species. The representatives at Nexus Prime will have already sent word to their homeworlds. By the time we reach Earth, the galaxy will know that a human saved the last of the Drachma. That's going to complicate things, isn't it? Enormously. Kedron's amusement rippled through their mental connection. Your species' position in the galactic hierarchy has just shifted from barely tolerated newcomers to people who saved a living god. The political implications will be substantial. They entered Earth's solar system on the third day, and Sarah felt a familiar tug of emotion as the blue and white marble of her homeworld came into view. She'd been away for 8 months on her research expedition, and seeing home again made her realize how much she'd missed it. Earth might not be the most technologically advanced world in the galaxy, or the most strategically important, but it was beautiful in a way that still took her breath away. It's lovely, Kedron said, reading her thoughts. Unspoiled in a way that most inhabited worlds are not. We've learned a few things about environmental management the hard way, Sarah replied. Nearly destroyed the biosphere a few times before we figured out how to live in balance with our planet. Yes, I have read your histories. Another sign of wisdom, that you were able to recognize your mistakes and correct them. They descended through Earth's atmosphere, and Sarah was surprised when Kedron didn't head for one of the major spaceports. Instead, he flew toward the northern hemisphere, toward the mountains of what had once been called the Pacific Northwest. Where are we going? She asked. To your home, I believe. The small research station where you live between missions. Sarah blinked in surprise. How do you know about that? I have been observing humanity for some time, Sarah Chun. Your personal history, your work, your character, these things interest me. There was a pause, and when Kedron continued, his mental voice was gentle. I hope you do not mind. When one has lived as long as I have, one develops an appreciation for individuals who embody the best qualities of their species. They landed in the clearing behind her cabin, a small structure built into the mountainside with a view of the valley below. It was rustic by galactic standards, built mostly from local stone and timber, but it was hers. Sarah had designed and built it herself during her graduate studies, wanting a place to retreat to between the demands of research and teaching. As they touched down, Sarah noticed that they weren't alone. A figure emerged from the cabin's front door, tall, elderly, with the kind of presence that suggested importance despite his simple clothing. Dr. Chun, the man said as Sarah climbed down from Kedron's back. Administrator Harrison, Earth Colonial Authority. We need to talk. Sarah had met Harrison once before at a funding review for her research grant. He was one of the senior officials responsible for humanity's participation in galactic affairs, and his presence here meant that word of recent events had indeed traveled fast. Administrator, she said politely, I wasn't expecting a welcoming committee. I wasn't expecting one of my researchers to return home riding a mythological creature and accompanied by diplomatic messages from every major power in the local sector, Harrison replied dryly. The past 4 days have been interesting. Kedron lowered his great head to Harrison's eye level. Administrator Harrison, I have heard of you. Your reputation for fairness in dealing with the other galactic powers precedes you. To his credit, Harrison didn't flinch at being addressed directly by a 30-meter dragon. Lord Kedron, the honor is mine. On behalf of humanity, I want to express our gratitude for bringing Dr. Chen safely home. The debt is mine, not yours, Kedron replied. Your Dr. Chen saved my life with nothing but courage and kindness. It is I who am grateful. Harrison nodded, then turned back to Sarah. Dr. Chun, we have a situation. In the past 72 hours, we've received formal communications from the Zephyrian Collective, the Thraxian Republic, the Veldari Empire, and the Corvani Hegemony. All of them want to discuss humanity's new role in galactic affairs. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Oh no, how bad is it? That depends on your perspective, Harrison said carefully. The Zephyrians are calling you the sacred healer and want to establish formal religious exchanges with Earth. The Thraxians are offering exclusive trading rights and technology transfers. The Valdari want to discuss mutual defense pacts. He paused. The Corvani want to schedule a formal inquiry into the circumstances of Lord Kedron's rescue. Let me guess, Sarah said. They're claiming I couldn't possibly have done what I did without some kind of outside help. Among other things, Senator Calvesh has raised questions about whether humanity might have been hiding advanced medical capabilities, whether your encounter with Lord Kedron was truly random, and whether Earth might be using ancient Drachma artifacts to enhance human abilities. Kedron's mental voice rumbled with anger, and Sarah felt heat radiating from his scales. The Corvani have always been adept at creating conspiracy theories to explain away evidence that contradicts their worldview. The problem, Harrison continued, is that their questions are gaining traction among some of the other powers. If humanity suddenly has capabilities we've never demonstrated before, it changes the entire balance of galactic politics. Sarah looked between Harrison and Kedron, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. So what do? We demonstrate, Kedron said simply. What do you mean? The galaxy believes that what you did was impossible for a human using standard medical techniques. Very well, we show them otherwise. The dragon's mental voice carried quiet determination. We prove that human compassion, combined with human medical knowledge, is indeed capable of healing even the firstborn. Harrison frowned. How do we prove something like that? By recreating the circumstances, Kedron replied. Under controlled conditions, observed by representatives from all the major powers, I will allow myself to be injured, and Dr. Chun will heal me using only the medical supplies available to any human physician. Sarah stared at him in horror. Absolutely not. I'm not going to hurt you just to prove a point to some politicians. The injuries will not be severe, little healer. Nothing like what I sustained in the crash. And the political implications of this demonstration will benefit your entire species. I don't care about the political implications. Sarah snapped. I won't hurt someone I care about just to satisfy the doubts of people who are looking for excuses to keep humanity down. The clearing fell silent. Even the wind seemed to still as the full import of Sarah's words sank in. She had just declared in front of one of Earth's senior diplomatic officials and a being who was essentially a living god that she cared more about Kedron's well-being than about humanity's position in the galaxy. Oh, Harrison said quietly. I see. See what? Sarah asked, suddenly defensive. Why they're calling you the sacred healer, he replied. It's not just about what you did, Dr. Chun. It's about why you did it. And, apparently, why you'd do it again. Kedron's mental laughter was warm and approving. Administrator Harrison understands something that the other galactic powers do not. The source of human strength is not in their technology or their military capabilities. It is in their capacity to form genuine bonds with others, even across species lines. The Zephyrians noticed it first, Harrison explained. In their formal communication, they mentioned that their cultural analysts had identified something they called emotional authenticity in the reports of your interaction with Lord Kedron. Apparently, it's extremely rare for members of different species to form genuine effective bonds outside of formal alliance structures. Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks. I don't understand what you're getting at. Dr. Chun, Harrison said gently, in galactic politics, relationships between species are transactional. Trade relationships, military alliances, diplomatic accords, they're all based on mutual benefit and calculated advantage. Personal friendships across species lines are almost unknown. That can't be true. Surely people from different species become friends. Within established alliance structures, yes. But spontaneous, genuine affection between individuals from unallied species? The kind of protective instinct you just displayed toward Lord Kedron. Harrison shook his head. According to our xenological experts, it's unprecedented. Kedron settled more comfortably on the ground, his massive form somehow managing to look relaxed despite his size. This is why your species is unique, Sarah. Other races form alliances based on logic, on shared interests, on calculated benefits. Humans form connections based on emotional resonance, on shared experience, on simple affection. It makes you appear weak to those who equate strength with isolation, but it is actually your greatest source of power. I still don't understand how my friendship with Kedron changes anything politically. Because, Harrison said, if humanity can form genuine emotional bond with other species, including species as ancient and powerful as the Drachmer, it suggests that we might be the key to resolving some of the galaxy's most intractable conflicts. Think about it, Dr. Chun. Most galactic disputes arise from mutual mistrust, from the assumption that other species are fundamentally incomprehensible or untrustworthy. But if humans can bridge those gaps, the implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're talking about making humanity into galactic mediators. The Zephyrians have already proposed it, Harrison confirmed. They want to establish a formal program placing human diplomats and negotiators in dispute resolution roles throughout their territory. The Thraxians are considering similar arrangements for trade negotiations. And the Corvani? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Senator Calvesh is convinced that this is all part of some elaborate human conspiracy to destabilize the existing power structure. He's demanding a full investigation, including interrogation of you under Valdari truth detection techniques. Sarah looked at Kedron, who had been listening to this exchange with what she was learning to recognize as amused interest. What do you think we should do? I think, Kedron replied, that the galaxy is about to learn what happens when they underestimate the power of human kindness. And I think Senator Calvesh is about to receive an education that his species has been avoiding for far too long. Meaning, little healer, that it is time for the Drachmer to take a more active role in galactic affairs. And time for humanity to assume its rightful place among the powers of the galaxy. Kedron's mental voice carried ancient authority and quiet determination. The age of hiding is over for both of us. The great assembly hall on Nexus Prime had been built to accommodate delegates from every known species in the galaxy. Its crystalline dome stretched nearly a kilometer across, with seating arranged in concentric circles that could theoretically hold representatives from 10,000 different worlds. Sarah had seen pictures of it in her Xenopolitics textbooks, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of standing in its center while thousands of beings from across the galaxy watched her every move. 3 weeks had passed since her return to Earth. 3 weeks of preparation and negotiation and increasingly heated diplomatic exchanges. The Corvani had demanded a formal inquiry into what they were calling the Drachmer incident. The Zephyrians had countered by proposing that it be treated as a sacred event worthy of celebration rather than investigation. The Thraxians wanted to study her medical techniques, while the Valdari were more interested in the strategic implications of humanity's apparent new capabilities. In the end, it was Kedron who had proposed the solution, a formal demonstration before the full Galactic Assembly, where the truth could be established beyond doubt and all questions resolved through direct observation. Are you ready for this? Administrator Harrison asked quietly as they waited in the preparation chamber adjacent to the main hall. He was dressed in his formal diplomatic robes, but Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands kept fidgeting with the ceremonial staff that marked his rank. No, Sarah replied honestly. I'm terrified. I never wanted to be the center of galactic politics. I just wanted to help someone who was hurt. I know, but this is bigger than what you wanted now. This is about what humanity becomes in the galaxy. Harrison's voice was gentle but firm. The demonstration you're about to perform will determine whether our species rises to become a major galactic power or remains forever in the shadows as support staff for our betters. Through the chamber's viewing window, Sarah could see the massive form of Kedron at the center of the assembly hall's main floor. He lay in what looked like a relaxed position, but she could sense his alertness through their mental connection. Around the circular seating arrangement, representatives from nearly every known species watched and waited. The Corvani delegation occupied a prominent position in the first ring, with Senator Calvesh himself leading their group. He'd grown even more vocal in his opposition over the past weeks, claiming that the entire situation was an elaborate deception designed to elevate humanity's status through false pretenses. His accusations had gained support among some of the more militaristic species, those who saw humanity's potential rise as a threat to their own positions in the galactic hierarchy. But there were supporters too. The Zephyrians had sent their high mystic, a being so advanced in their spiritual practices that they rarely left their homeworld. Their presence alone was a statement of how seriously they took these events. The Thraxian delegation included several of their most respected scientists, while the Valdari had dispatched a full military honors guard. Dr. Chun, came a voice from the chamber's entrance. Sarah turned to see a tall, elegant being with the silver skin and flowing robes characteristic of the Zephyrians. I am Mystic Urelden, and I bring greetings from the collective. We wanted to speak with you before the demonstration begins. Sarah inclined her head respectfully. The Zephyrians were among the oldest and most respected species in the galaxy, and their spiritual practices were legendary. The honor is mine, Mystic. What can I do for you? You can help us understand something that has puzzled our greatest philosophers, Urelden replied, their musical voice carrying notes of genuine curiosity. Our cultural analysts have studied the records of your encounter with Lord Kedron, and we cannot comprehend the mechanism by which you formed such a rapid emotional bond with a being you had never encountered before. I'm not sure I understand the question. Among our people, and among most species we know, the development of trust and affection requires extended interaction, shared experiences, proof of mutual benefit. Yet you risked your life for Lord Kedron within moments of meeting him, with no knowledge of his nature or capabilities. How is this possible? Sarah considered the question seriously. It was something she'd been thinking about herself over the past weeks, trying to understand her own motivations. I think, she said slowly, it's because I didn't see him as an alien. I saw him as someone who was hurt and needed help. His species didn't matter. His ability to help me in return didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that he was suffering, and I could do something about it. Urelden, his opalescent eyes widened slightly. You mean that you formed an empathetic connection based purely on recognition of another being's pain? Yes, I suppose that's it exactly. The Zephyrian was quiet for a long moment. This ability to instantly recognize and respond to suffering in others, regardless of species barriers. Our philosophers have theorized about such a capacity, but we believe it was mythical, a trait that the ancient text described, but that no living species possesses. What do you mean? The oldest records speak of beings called bridgewalkers, individuals capable of forming connections across any divide, of seeing past surface differences to the universal experiences that connect all sentient life. We thought they were legends, metaphors for spiritual ideals rather than actual capabilities. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying this is something unusual? Unusual? Urelden. S laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Dr. Chun, if our theories are correct, you may possess one of the rarest abilities in the galaxy. The capacity for universal empathy, for connection that transcends species, culture, and evolutionary history. Before Sarah could respond to this disturbing possibility, the chamber's communications system crackled to life. The Galactic Assembly is ready to begin. All participants, please take your positions. Sarah's hands were shaking as she gathered her medical supplies. Harrison had managed to procure a kit identical to the one she'd used on the moon, down to the specific manufacturers of each component. Everything had been verified and documented by neutral observers to ensure that no advanced technology was being hidden. Remember, Harrison said as they prepared to enter the main hall, you're not just representing yourself today. You're representing all of humanity's potential in the galaxy. No pressure, Sarah muttered, echoing her earlier conversation with Kedron. The main floor of the assembly hall felt even more vast from the inside. As Sarah walked toward the center where Kedron waited, the sound of thousands of beings watching her every move created a subtle susurrus that reminded her uncomfortably of wind through a graveyard. The weight of so much attention was almost physical pressing down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Kedron's mental voice whispered in her consciousness as she approached. "Courage, little healer. Today we change the galaxy." "I'm scared," she admitted through their connection. "Good. Fear keeps one alert. But remember, you have already done this once before under much worse conditions. Today you simply repeat what you have already proven possible." The Assembly's moderator, an ancient Veldari whose ceremonial armor marked him as one of their highest judicial officers, called the session to order. His amplified voice echoed through the vast dome as he outlined the purpose of the demonstration and the rules that would govern it. The Assembly recognizes Senator Calvesh of the Corvani hegemony, who has requested this inquiry, the moderator announced. Calvesh rose from his seat in the first ring, his purple robes flowing dramatically as he addressed the Assembly. "Honored delegates, we are here today because certain claims have been made that strain credibility. We are told that a human, a member of a species barely 2 centuries into space travel, successfully treated injuries that should have been fatal to one of the firstborn using nothing more than basic medical supplies." His voice carried just the right note of reasonable skepticism, Sarah noticed. He wasn't directly calling her a liar, just expressing perfectly logical doubts about the situation. The Corvani hegemony does not make these challenges lightly, Calvesh continued. But the implications of accepting these claims without verification are too significant to ignore. If humanity possesses medical capabilities beyond what they have previously demonstrated, it changes everything we know about their potential role in galactic affairs. Murmurs of agreement rippled through sections of the Assembly. Sarah could see delegates nodding, particularly among the more conservative species that preferred the stability of established hierarchies. "Furthermore," Calvesh said, his voice growing stronger, "we must consider the possibility that what occurred was not medical treatment at all, but some form of technological intervention. Perhaps ancient Drachma artifacts, perhaps assistance from unknown sources. The truth must be established through careful observation and analysis." When he finished, Mystic Urel then rose to respond on behalf of the Zephyrian delegation. "Honored moderator, the collective does not share the Corvani senator's skepticism. We have observed many acts of healing over the centuries, and we recognize genuine compassion when we see it. What Dr. Chen accomplished was not a display of superior technology, but of superior character. Character does not regenerate damaged organs," Calvesh shot back. "Character does not repair complex biological systems. If this human truly healed Lord Kedron with basic medical supplies, then either our understanding of Drachma physiology is fundamentally flawed, or something else occurred on that moon. Perhaps," came a new voice, deep and resonant, "your understanding of many things is fundamentally flawed." The entire assembly fell silent as Kedron raised his massive head to address them directly. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that seemed to vibrate in the very structure of the building. "Senator Calvesh, you speak of technological intervention and unknown assistance as though they're the only possible explanations for what occurred. But you overlook the simplest explanation of all, which is that Dr. Sarah Chun succeeded where others might have failed, not because she possessed superior tools, but because she approached my injuries with something that none of the other species represented here have ever shown: unconditional compassion." Calvesh's expression grew hard. "Compassion is an emotion, Lord Kedron, not a medical technique. Emotional responses do not alter physical reality. Do they not?" Kedron's mental voice reached not just Sarah, but apparently every being in the assembly. The sensation was like being touched by ancient starlight, warm and overwhelming and infinite. Tell me, Senator, when did your people last heal someone who could not benefit them in return? When did any of your species offer aid without calculating the advantage it would bring? The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and revealing. Sarah could see delegates shifting in their seats, avoiding each other's eyes. The Drachmer have watched the younger races for millennia, Kedron continued, and we have seen the same pattern repeated across 1,000 worlds. Species rise to power through strength, through cunning, through technological advancement. But they forget the simple truth that allowed them to survive their earliest days, that helping others, without thought of reward, creates bonds that no amount of military might can break. He turned his ancient eyes towards Sarah, and she felt the full weight of his regard. Dr. Chun did not save my life with superior medical technology. She saved it because when she looked at me, she saw not an alien creature of unknown capabilities, but simply a living being in pain. Her medical techniques were standard, available to any competent physician. But her motivation was extraordinary. Kedron's gaze swept across the assembly, and that honor delegates is what you truly fear. Not that humanity possesses secret weapons or hidden technologies, but that they possess something you have forgotten how to feel. The galaxy's established powers maintain their positions through careful calculation of strength and advantage. But humans succeed through the simple expedient of caring about others. A touching philosophy, Calvesh said dismissively, but philosophy does not constitute evidence. If Dr. Chin's methods are truly as simple as claimed, then let her demonstrate them. Under controlled conditions, with proper observation, using only the supplies she claims to have used before. Very well, Kedron replied. But understand, Senator, that what you are about to witness will challenge every assumption your species has made about the nature of power in the galaxy. The dragon settled back onto the floor of the assembly hall, and Sarah felt his mental presence withdraw slightly, preparing for what was to come. She opened her medical kit with hands that were steadier than she had any right to expect, laying out the instruments and supplies in the order she would need them. The demonstration will now begin, the moderator announced. All sensors are recording, all observations are being documented. Let the record show that Lord Kedron is about to inflict controlled injuries upon himself, and that Dr. Chun will attempt to treat these injuries using only the supplies visible to the assembly. Sarah took a deep breath and looked up at the thousands of beings watching her every move. This was it, the moment that would determine humanity's future among the stars. "I'm ready," she said quietly. Kedron's claw, sharp as a molecular blade and harder than any known metal, drew a precise line across his own flank. Blue blood, thick and luminescent, began to flow from the wound, and Sarah Chun, xenobiologist of Earth, knelt beside the last dragon in the galaxy and began to work. Sarah's hands moved with practiced precision as she cleaned the wound Kedron had inflicted on himself. The cut was deeper than she would have liked for a demonstration, but not life-threatening. Exactly the kind of injury that would heal naturally given time, but which could become dangerous if left untreated. The perfect test case for her abilities. Around the vast assembly hall, thousands of beings watched in absolute silence. Every sensor was focused on her movements, every recording device capturing the minutest detail of her technique. She could feel the weight of their attention, but she forced herself to focus only on the task at hand. This was just another patient, she told herself. Just another being who needed help. The blue blood that flowed from Kedron's wound was unlike anything in her medical database, but her scanner quickly adapted, analyzing its composition and adjusting its readings accordingly. The basics were familiar: cellular damage, vascular trauma, the kind of injury she'd treated hundreds of times in different species. The scale was larger, and the biochemistry was unique, but the fundamental principles remained the same. "Initiating standard trauma protocol," she said aloud, more for the benefit of the watching assembly than for her own needs. "First priority is stopping the bleeding and preventing shock." She injected biofoam directly into the wound, using the same technique she'd employed on the moon. The synthetic material expanded to fill the damaged tissue, creating a matrix that would support natural healing while preventing further blood loss. It was basic emergency medicine, taught in first-year xenobiology courses across human space. But as the biofoam took hold and the bleeding slowed, something remarkable happened. The assembly began to murmur, voices rising in what sounded like surprise or confusion. Sarah glanced up from her work to see delegates pointing at holographic displays that showed microscopic views of the treatment area. "The cellular regeneration rate is increasing," announced one of the Thoraxian observers, their crystalline voice carrying clearly through the dome. "The biofoam is not just stopping the bleeding, it's actively accelerating the healing process." Senator Calvesh leaned forward in his seat. "That's impossible. Standard biofoam is an inert material. It provides structure for natural healing, nothing more." Nevertheless, the Thoraxian continued, "Our sensors show cellular activity well beyond normal parameters. The wound is healing at approximately 10 times the expected rate." Sarah looked down at her hands, confused. The biofoam she was using was completely standard, identical to supplies used by medical personnel throughout the galaxy. There was nothing special about it, nothing that should produce enhanced healing. "Unless it's not the biofoam," she said quietly, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "It's me." Kedron's mental voice whispered in her consciousness, warm with approval and something that might have been pride. "Now you begin to understand, little healer." "Understand what?" "Why the galaxy will never be the same." Sarah continued her work, applying synthetic skin patches and administering antibiotics, but her mind was reeling. Every technique she used, every supply she applied, seemed to work better than it should. The wound was closing faster than medical science said was possible, the tissue regenerating with an efficiency that defied explanation. As she worked, she became aware that something else was happening. The assembly hall, which had been filled with the quiet murmur of thousands of watching delegates, was growing silent again. But this wasn't the tense silence of earlier. This was something deeper, more profound. She looked up to see that many of the delegates were no longer watching her technique. They were watching her face. "What is it?" she asked Kedron through their mental link. "Look at yourself, little healer. See what they see." Sarah caught her reflection in the polished surface of her medical scanner and gasped. Her face was suffused with a soft golden light, the same warm radiance she had seen from Kedron when he healed himself on the moon. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It was gentle, peaceful, like candlelight or sunrise. And as she watched, she realized that the light was growing stronger. "This is what the galaxy has forgotten," Kedron's voice said, not just in her mind now, but somehow in the minds of everyone present. "This is what the Drachmer have always known, what the ancient texts speak of, what your species alone has preserved. Healing is not just a technique or a technology. It is a manifestation of compassion made visible." The delegates were stirring now, voices rising in excitement, confusion, awe. Sarah heard snatches of conversation in a dozen different languages, translators working frantically to keep up with the flood of commentary. "Impossible," The energy readings, never seen anything like. Is she actually glowing? Senator Calvesh was on his feet, pointing an accusatory finger at Sarah. Trickery. Some form of technological enhancement. No natural being produces that kind of energy signature. But his protests were drowned out by the voice of mystic Irrelevant, whose response carried the authority of millennia of spiritual study. Senator, what you are witnessing is not technology. It is the manifestation of what our oldest texts call the healer's fire, a phenomenon that occurs when genuine compassion creates a resonance with the fundamental forces of life itself. Spiritual nonsense. Is it? Urel then. S voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the music. Your own sensors will confirm that Dr. Chun is generating no artificial energy fields, using no hidden devices. What you see is purely biological, the result of a mind and heart in perfect harmony with the act of healing. Sarah finished the last of her treatments and sat back on her heels, examining her work. Kedron's wound was completely healed, not just closed, but restored as if it had never existed. The scales were perfect, the underlying tissue showed no sign of trauma, and even the blood that had been spilled was somehow gone, as if it had been reabsorbed by his body. "Ow," she whispered, because Kedron said aloud, his voice carrying to every corner of the assembly hall. True healing has never been about medicine alone. The greatest physicians throughout history, in every species, have understood this. They heal not just with knowledge and technique, but with genuine care for their patients' well-being. What makes humans unique is that this care comes naturally to them, without training, without philosophy, without conscious effort. He rose to his full height, his scales catching and reflecting the golden light that still surrounded Sarah. Dr. Sarah Chun healed me not because she possessed superior technology, but because she approached my pain with perfect compassion. And in doing so, she unlocked abilities that have been dormant in her species, waiting for the right moment to emerge. What are you saying? Administrator Harrison called out from the diplomatic observer section. That all humans have this ability? I am saying, Kedron replied, that any human who approaches the act of healing with genuine love and compassion will find that their efforts are enhanced beyond the limitations of mere technique. I am saying that your species' capacity for unconditional care is not just a philosophical ideal. It is a source of literal power. The implications hit the assembly like a shockwave. Sarah could see it in their faces, hear it in their excited conversations. If Kedron was right, if human compassion could literally enhance medical treatment, then humanity wasn't just another species struggling to find its place in the galaxy. They were potentially the most gifted healers the galaxy had ever seen. But it was Senator Calvesh who voiced the question that was on everyone's mind. If this is true, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fear, then what does it mean for the rest of us? Kedron turned his ancient eyes toward the Corvani delegate. It means, Senator, that the age of power through dominance is ending. It means that the galaxy is about to discover that strength through compassion is far more powerful than strength through conquest. You're talking about changing the entire structure of galactic civilization. I'm talking about restoring it to what it was always meant to be. Kedron's voice grew stronger, carrying harmonics that made the very air vibrate with authority. The Drachmer guided the younger races for millennia, but we made a crucial error. We tried to teach wisdom and compassion as philosophy, as moral instruction, as spiritual discipline. We failed to understand that some species are born with these gifts. His gaze swept across the assembly. Humans do not need to learn compassion. They embody it naturally. They do not need to study the healing arts. They instinctively understand that alleviating suffering is life's highest calling. And when they combine this natural empathy with their considerable intelligence and adaptability, they become something unprecedented in galactic history. What? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she knew the answer. Bridge builders, irrelevant, whispered from the Zephyrian section. The legends were true. They spoke of a people who would arise to heal the divisions between all species, who would teach the galaxy to see beyond difference to the common bonds that unite all life. Precisely, Kedron said. And now that Dr. Chun has demonstrated the reality of human healing abilities, every species in the galaxy will want to learn from them. The Thraxians will seek human doctors for their mining colonies. The Valdari will want human medics for their military forces. The Zephyrians will request human healers to study with their spiritual masters. Senator Calvesh's face was pale with realization. You're describing the complete restructuring of galactic society. If humans become indispensable as healers and mediators, then perhaps, Kedron said quietly, it will finally be possible to build the kind of civilization the galaxy was always meant to have. One based not on fear and competition, but on mutual support and genuine care for one another's well-being. The golden light surrounding Sarah was beginning to fade, but its effects lingered in the charged atmosphere of the assembly hall. She could see it in the faces around her. Wonder, hope, fear, and something that might have been the first stirrings of respect for humanity as more than just another minor species struggling to survive in a hostile galaxy. The demonstration is concluded, the moderator announced, though his ceremonial composure was clearly shaken by what he had witnessed. The assembly will now hear closing statements from the principal parties. Senator Calvesh stood slowly, his previous confidence replaced by something that looked almost like defeat. The Corvani hegemony withdraws its objections to the original claims. It is clear that what occurred was not technological deception, but something far more unprecedented. He paused, struggling with words. However, we must ask what this means for the established order of galactic civilization. It means, came a new voice from the Thraxian section, that the established order was never as stable as we pretended it was. The speaker was Crystal Lord Thexvar, one of the most conservative members of the Thraxian Republic's ruling council. If he was acknowledging the implications of what they had witnessed, then the political earthquake was already beginning. For centuries, we have divided the galaxy into categories. Thexvar continued, his crystalline form flickering with patterns that indicated deep thought. Military powers, technological innovators, spiritual guides, resource providers. We assumed these categories were fixed, that each species had found its natural niche in the cosmic order. But Dr. Chin's demonstration proves that some capabilities transcend these artificial boundaries. Mystic Urel, then, rose gracefully from the Zephyrian section. The collective has long taught that the universe seeks balance, that every species contributes something unique to the greater harmony of existence. Today we have learned what humanity's unique gift truly is. They are not just another technological species or military power. They are healers in the deepest sense. Beings capable of mending not just physical injuries, but the spiritual wounds that divide us all. Pretty words, Senator Calvesh said bitterly. But what happens to those of us who have built our civilizations on different principles? What happens to species that have thrived through strength and cunning rather than compassion? Are we to simply step aside for humanity's new golden age? Sarah stood up, surprised by her own boldness. The assembly fell silent as she prepared to speak, and she realized that this might be the most important words she ever uttered. "Senator," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast dome, "I think you're misunderstanding what this is about. I didn't heal Kedron because I wanted power or status for humanity. I healed him because he was hurt and I could help. That's all it was. And yet your actions have changed the balance of galactic politics forever. Maybe, but not because humans want to rule anybody. We don't want to replace your systems or tear down what you've built. We just want to help where we can." Sarah looked around the assembly, meeting the eyes or optical sensors of delegates from dozens of different species. Every civilization here has achievements humans could never match. Your technology, your art, your philosophy, your understanding of the universe. These are gifts beyond anything we could create. But maybe we can offer something too. What? Calvesh asked, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely curious rather than hostile. A different way of relating to each other. A way that doesn't require anyone to be stronger or weaker, superior or inferior. Just beings helping other beings because that's what life should be about. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the soft sound of the assembly's life support systems. Then, slowly, Crystal Lord Thexvar began to emit a sound Sarah had never heard from a Theraxian before. A pure, crystalline note that seemed to express something beyond words. Other delegates joined in, each species adding their own voice to what became a harmony unlike anything in galactic history. The Zephyrians' musical tones blended with the Valdari's rhythmic chanting. The Theraxians' crystalline notes merged with sound from 100 other species. Even some of the Corvani delegation joined in, their voices adding depth to the growing chorus. "What's happening?" Sarah whispered to Kedron. "Something that has not occurred in 3,000 years, he replied, his mental voice filled with wonder. "The Great Harmony, a song that all species can share, expressing unity across every barrier that divides them. The last time it was heard was when the Drachmer first brought the younger races together in peace. And now it rises again, because a human woman looked at a dying dragon and chose to help." Kedron's great head turned toward her, and she saw something in his ancient eyes that she had never seen before. Hope. "Sarah Chun, sacred healer of Earth, you have given the galaxy something it thought lost forever. The possibility of genuine peace." The harmony continued for several more minutes. Voices from across the cosmos joining together in a song that transcended language, species, and the countless differences that had divided them for millennia. When it finally faded, the silence that followed was not empty, but full, pregnant with possibility, with the promise of what could be. Administrator Harrison made his way down to the assembly floor, his face showing a mixture of pride, terror, and exhaustion. "Dr. Chun," he said quietly, "I think you're going to be very busy in the coming years." "What do you mean?" "Every species in the galaxy is going to want to establish medical exchange programs with Earth. Every planetary government will be requesting human healers. Every diplomatic crisis will be calling for human mediators." He paused, looking around at the thousands of delegates who were still watching her with expressions ranging from awe to calculation. "Congratulations. You've just made humanity the most sought-after species in the galaxy." Sarah felt a familiar weight settling on her shoulders, the burden of responsibility for consequences far beyond anything she had intended. But this time there was something else too. For the first time since this all began, she felt ready for what was coming. "Administrator," she said, "I'm going to need to make some requests." "Name them." "First, I want humanity's response to be coordinated through civilian medical authorities, not military or political ones. This isn't about power or strategy. It's about helping people. Second, any human who participates in these programs does so as a volunteer, not as a representative of Earth's government. And third, she looked up at Kedron, who nodded encouragingly. I want to establish the first interspecies medical training program, where human healers learn from other species techniques while teaching our own approaches. Knowledge should flow in all directions. Agreed, Harrison said immediately. Though you realize this means you'll probably be spending the rest of your career traveling between worlds, training doctors, and establishing medical programs? Sarah smiled, thinking of the small cabin in Earth's mountains that she had thought of as home. It seemed very far away now, part of a simpler life that no longer existed. I can think of worse fates than spending my life helping people get better at helping people. Kedron's laughter rumbled through her mind. Spoken like a true healer. Very well, Sarachan. Are you ready to change the galaxy? She looked around the great assembly hall at the thousands of beings from across the cosmos who were watching her with hope and expectation and the dawning realization that the universe had just become a very different place. It was terrifying and overwhelming and completely beyond anything she had ever imagined for her life. It was also, she realized, exactly what she was meant to do. Yes, she said simply. Let's get to work. And in the years that followed, as human healers spread across the galaxy, and the art of compassionate medicine became the foundation of a new era of cooperation between species, historians would mark this moment as the beginning of what became known as the Age of Healing. An age when the simple act of one woman helping a stranger in pain became the catalyst for the greatest transformation in galactic history. But Sarah Chun, the sacred healer, would always remember it more simply. It was the day she learned that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can echo across the stars.